Tonight we're venturing deep into the dark woods of Texas, where campfires glow faintly against endless shadows, and every rustle in the trees might be more than just the wind. From strange whispers echoing through the pines to encounters no camper dares to explain, get ready for 20 true and horrifying camping stories from the Texas woods that will make you think twice before pitching your tent under the stars. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing, and by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning and the terror waiting beyond the campfire is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now let's dive into the darkness. I suppose the story really starts with the weather. That East Texas kind of stillness that settles over the forest after a spring rain. The kind where everything smells like pine needles and damp earth, and the only sounds are frogs croaking in the distance and water dripping slowly from leaf to leaf. It was a Friday in early May, one of those humid nights where the trees seemed to sweat alongside you, and the air buzzed with the energy of something just barely forgotten. I was 18, then, fresh-faced, nervous about graduation and ready to leave my small town behind. My best friend Jay and I had this idea to take a senior trip on our own terms. Nothing flashy, no beach, no city, just a tent, a couple of sleeping bags, and the wild hush of Big Thicket. We picked a remote camping spot a couple miles down, the Turkey Creek Trail, deep enough in the preserve that even cell service gave up trying. We wanted peace, solitude, and for the first half of the trip, that's exactly what we got. The hike-in was muddy from the storm earlier that afternoon, and the sun dipped low as we set up camp, turning the tall pine trunks into long black stripes against a red-gold sky. By the time we finished roasting hot dogs over a weak little fire, night had fully taken over, with only a sliver of moon poking through the canopy above. I remember how quiet it was, not in a spooky way, just calm. Crickets chirped. The occasional owl called from some invisible branch. Jay had brought a Bluetooth speaker and played old country music until the battery died. Then it was just us in the trees, the firelight flickering against canvas and bark. Strange signs. The first strange thing happened around midnight. We were both dozing in our sleeping bags, fire almost out, when I heard footsteps, soft, cautious, just outside the tent. I sat up, heart suddenly alert. Jay whispered, "You hear that too?" "Probably a raccoon," I said. "Or an armadillo." We listened. The steps circled once, then stopped. There was a pause, and then I heard my own voice say, "You hear that too?" Exactly the way I just said it. Same cadence, same little nervous laugh at the end. Jay turned toward me. "Dude, that was you, right?" I shook my head slowly. I think it came from outside." The night held its breath, waited. Nothing else came, no more footsteps, no more voices. Just the gentle drip-drip of water on leaves. Eventually, we chalked it up to echoes, or a weird trick of the acoustics in the forest. Maybe the trees had a way of catching sound and throwing it back at you. That seemed possible, didn't it? Escalation. The next day passed without incident. We hiked, took pictures of mushrooms, watched a deer cross the path ahead of us. But that night, the second night, the unease crept back in. This time, we didn't even make it to midnight. Around 10:45, Jay went off a few yards to pee. I stayed by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick. The night air was thick, like it had soaked up all the rain and now just hung there, dense and unmoving. I heard Jay say from the trees, "Hey, come here a sec." I stood up. "What is it?" No response. Just frogs, chirping faintly. "Jay?" I called, and then I heard his voice behind me, clear, close. "Who are you talking to?" I spun around. Jay stood 10 feet away, coming back from the opposite direction. "Dude," I said, throat suddenly dry. "I just heard you call me from over there." He frowned. I didn't say anything. We didn't sleep much that night. At some point the fire died out again and I heard breathing near the tent. Not loud, just soft, steady, deliberate, like someone crouching right at the edge of the nylon wall. I held my breath, and the sound stopped. Jay didn't hear it, or said he didn't. The next morning we found a single muddy footprint pressed into the fabric of the tent door, human-shaped, but the toes were wrong, too long, too far apart. Jay wanted to pack up. I talked him into staying one more night. Wish I hadn't. Quiet climax that last night. The forest was quieter than ever. No crickets, no wind. Even the frogs seemed to know better. We stayed up with our flashlights and pocket knives, not talking much. Around 1 a.m., Jay dozed off, slumped against his backpack. I sat alone by the glowing coals, listening. That's when I heard it, from just beyond the reach of the firelight. "Hey, come here a sec." Jay's voice, then closer. "You hear that too?" My voice. I didn't move, and then from the shadows between the trees came a third voice. Low, wet, like someone gargling their way through speech. "Let me in." I saw a shape then. Tall. Wrong. Like a silhouette where no light should cast one. It moved between trees without sound, without disturbing a single leaf. I backed into the tent. Jay woke up groggy, panicked. I didn't have to say anything. The look on my face told him everything he needed to know. We sat back to back for the next 4 hours, knives in hand, as that thing walked circles around our camp, sometimes imitating us, sometimes whispering things we hadn't said yet. Aftermath, when the sun finally rose, it all stopped. No footprints, no broken branches. Just a campsite exactly as we left it. We hiked out in silence, both of us glancing over our shoulders more than we'd admit. Jay moved to Dallas that summer. I went to school in Austin. We don't talk much now, but every now and then, maybe once or twice a year, I'll get a voicemail from an unknown number, and it's me, my own voice, saying something I haven't said yet. Once it was, "You hear that too?" Another time, "Let me in." I don't answer the calls anymore, and I never ever go camping. It's hard to explain why I'm still thinking about that photo. It's been almost a year now, and yet some nights like tonight, I find myself lying awake long past midnight, listening to the wind in the trees outside my window, thinking about that still image, and the man none of us remember seeing. It was late autumn when we took the trip, one of those spontaneous family getaways that happen less and less as your kids get older. My wife, Lisa, had found a cabin rental just outside Palo Duro Canyon. She loves that area. The big sweeping cliffs, the red earth, the cottonwoods glowing gold in the fall. There's a stillness to it that feels ancient, like the land is remembering something it hasn't said aloud in a long time. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The air was crisp, the sky overcast with heavy, slow-moving clouds. You could smell cedar and damp rock on the wind. My son, Jacob, was 13 then, old enough to roll his eyes at everything, but still young enough to get excited about roasting marshmallows and skipping stones in the canyon creek. He brought his camera too. He had this little digital point-and-shoot he'd gotten from his uncle last Christmas, and he loved taking pictures of trees, bugs, clouds, weird-shaped rocks. He saw details most of us didn't. The cabin was small, but comfortable. One bedroom, a pull-out couch, and a deck that overlooked the lower valley. The nearest neighbor was maybe half a mile down the trail, and we liked it that way. No noise, no signal. Just the slow crackle of the fire and the quiet rush of wind through the juniper trees. The first 2 days were ordinary, peaceful. We hiked a bit, sat by the fire at night, told Jacob stories about when we were kids. He'd groan and pretend to be bored, but I'd catch him smiling sometimes. On Sunday morning, just before packing up, we hiked out to this small plateau that looked out over a bend in the canyon, Lisa wanted a family photo with the cliffs behind us. The sun had just come out after 2 days of cloud, and the lighting was perfect. Jacob set the timer and propped the camera on a flat rock. We stood close, arm in arm, with the canyon sprawling wide behind us. Click. Then we packed up and drove home, full of that worn, sleepy contentment you get after being outside for a few days. It wasn't until a few weeks later that Lisa pulled the pictures off Jacob's camera. We'd forgotten about them. It was a cold, rainy Saturday, the kind where you stay in your pajamas till noon and drink too much coffee. She scrolled through them at the kitchen table, Jacob beside her poking fun at some of his goofy shots. Then she stopped, her brow furrowed in that way it does when she's trying to make sense of something that doesn't quite add up. "Do you remember seeing anyone else up there?" she asked me. I shook my head. "No, why?" She turned the camera toward me. It was the group photo, the one Jacob had taken with the timer. There we were, me, Lisa, Jacob, all smiling, the canyon behind us. And just over Jacob's left shoulder was a man. He was standing maybe 10 feet behind us, near the edge of the rock. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat that looked strangely out of place. Dusty, heavy, more suited to another era. His face was turned toward the camera, but his features were indistinct, as if caught mid-motion or slightly blurred. His posture was stiff. He looked wrong, somehow. Like he wasn't part of the scene. Like he'd been pasted in, but imperfectly. His feet didn't seem to cast a shadow. "Who is that?" Lisa asked. Jacob leaned closer. I didn't see anyone, seriously. We all stared at the screen for a while in silence. I tried to remember if we'd seen hikers or maybe a park ranger, someone just passing by. But the area had been empty. We would have heard footsteps or voices, and whoever it was had been standing too close. Too close for none of us to notice. We joked about it at first, trying to shake the weirdness. "Maybe it's a ghost," Lisa laughed half-heartedly. "The canyon cowboy." But Jacob didn't laugh. He got real quiet, and later that night I heard him get up and close his bedroom closet door. He never used to care about things like that. I'll admit I tried to forget about it. Life went on. School, work, errands. The picture stayed on Lisa's phone for a while, but she eventually deleted it. Said it gave her the creeps. I don't blame her. Every time I looked at it, I felt this strange tug, like a soft, cold hand brushing the back of my neck. There was something watching in that photo, a kind of quiet, patient presence. Then, a month later, something else happened. Jacob was in bed. Lisa had gone to sleep early with a migraine. I was sitting on the back porch with a blanket over my legs, sipping warm tea, listening to the wind. It was one of those nights when the air carries distant sounds. An owl, the creak of old branches, a train horn far off. Calming mostly, until I heard footsteps. Not from the front, from behind the house in the trees. They were slow, deliberate, crunching softly through fallen leaves. I stood up, heart suddenly beating faster. "Hello?" I called. "Can I help you?" No answer, just the breeze and the faint smell of damp earth. Then, silence. I waited a long time before going back inside, locked the doors, checked the windows, told myself it was nothing. But Jacob had been having dreams. Nightmares, he said, about someone watching him from the edge of the woods, a man with a wide-brimmed hat. The details changed. Sometimes the man stood still, sometimes he was walking toward him. But he was always silent, always staring. We didn't tell Jacob what we heard that night, didn't want to feed the fire. But then last week, it happened again. Jacob had left his camera in the living room after school. I picked it up just to check the battery. There were only a few photos, mostly blurry ones from a hike he'd taken with a friend, except the last one. It was a picture of our backyard, taken from the inside through the screen door. You could see the edge of the trees, the fading light of dusk. And there, at the tree line, a man, hat, coat, not moving, not waving. Just there. I still can't explain it. There's no reason for it, no neat ending where we find out he's a trick of the light or some odd passerby. We live in a normal house in a normal neighborhood. No history, no hauntings, no deaths. But sometimes, when I'm up late, like now, I hear the trees shift in the wind and I think about that first photo. And I wonder how long he was standing there, how many other pictures he might be in, how many people have looked right past him, never noticing. And most nights I tell myself it's nothing, just a strange trick of the light, a glitch in the camera, that's all. But then I remember the one thing that still bothers me the most. That photo Jacob took, the man isn't just behind us. He's looking directly at me. I've been meaning to write this down for a while now. Not because I expect anyone to believe it, but because sometimes writing helps you release a memory from the body, like drawing poison from a sting. It happened 3 summers ago, deep in the piney woods of East Texas, not far from where the Sabine River winds through a tangle of cypress and pine. It's a place where the crickets never stop chirping, where the ground stays soft and damp no matter the weather, and where the trees lean close together like old men sharing secrets. I went camping with 2 friends, Derek and Mason. We were all in that strange part of life where college was behind us, but the rest of the world hadn't quite settled yet. Derek had just broken up with someone. Mason was between jobs. I was just restless. So when Mason suggested a 3-day trip out where there'd be no cell signal and plenty of silence, we all agreed. We hiked out about 6 miles from the trailhead, following a half-forgotten path that hadn't seen boots in a long time. You could tell by the way the undergrowth clawed at our ankles and the way the spiders had built webs across the narrow trail. The deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to thicken, not just with trees, but with presence. That's the only way I can describe it. By late afternoon, we found a spot just off a slope where the trees opened up into a mossy clearing. There was an old stone fire ring there, half covered in weeds and pine needles. Clearly, someone had camped here before, but not recently. The first night was uneventful. We set up the tents, just one big one for all 3 of us because it seemed easier, and lit a fire. The air smelled like loam and old water. Crickets chirped like static. Somewhere off in the trees, a barred owl called out in that strange, laughing way they have. We told stories, drank a couple of beers, and fell asleep with the sound of frogs croaking from a distant creek. It was peaceful until the next morning, when Mason woke up swearing and slapping at his chest. He said something had brushed his face, in the night, wet and stringy like seaweed. When we unzipped the tent, we saw it. A smear of moss had grown across the inside flap of the door, thick, green, and damp, about the size of a dinner plate. We thought maybe we'd tracked some in, or maybe the humidity had pulled it out of the fabric. I scraped it off with the edge of a camping knife, and we didn't talk about it much after that. The rest of the day passed like normal, hot, muggy, with the scent of pine needles thick in the air. But that night, the knocking started. It was faint, barely there, like someone rapping softly against the fabric of the tent with a single knuckle. Tap, 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 3 times, always in the same rhythm. I sat up, heart ticking a little faster, and looked around. Mason was snoring lightly. Derek was awake, staring at the ceiling of the tent with his eyes wide open. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded once. Didn't speak. I crawled to the flap and unzipped it just a little. The night outside was pitch black. No moon, just the rustling of leaves and the whir of insects. Nothing moved. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, nothing. So I zipped it closed and lay back down. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I checked my watch. We heard it again. Tap, 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 this time from the other side of the tent. In the morning, the moss was back, thicker now, covering the entire inside flap from top to bottom, wet to the touch, smelled like pond water. We packed our bags. Mason wanted to hike out that day, but Derek convinced us to stay one more night. Said we were overreacting. Said it was just mold or some weird growth. East Texas is like that. Things grow fast in the damp and the woods are full of strange noises. Maybe he was right, or maybe he just didn't want to admit he was scared. That afternoon, the forest felt wrong. We didn't see a single squirrel or bird. No bugs, no spider webs. Even the frogs were quiet. Just the wind in the treetops, slow and steady, and a constant creaking sound, like something heavy swaying just out of view. When night fell, we didn't make a fire, just sat in the tent listening. The knocking didn't wait this time. It started as soon as the forest went dark. Tap, 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 then again, tap, tap, tap. This time from the back of the tent. We didn't speak, just sat there, frozen. I remember the way the fabric moved slightly, like something had brushed against it from the outside. Mason whispered that we should leave. Derek agreed. I checked my watch. 14 a.m. And then, the flap of the tent puffed, inward, like someone had breathed against it from the other side. We unzipped the flap and shined our flashlights into the woods. Nothing. Just trees. Black and endless. But the moss was already growing. We watched it bloom across the inner flap like time-lapse footage, slow but certain, spreading in wet green streaks that twisted like fingers. We packed in silence, left half our gear behind, hiked out by flashlight all the way back to the trailhead, never looked back. I don't camp anymore, not in woods like that. Mason says it was just rot, that the tent fabric was already compromised. Derek refuses to talk about it at all. But sometimes, around 3 a.m., I wake up from a dead sleep, with the faintest feeling that something's pressing gently against the wall beside my bed. And once, just once, I found a patch of moss growing on my bedroom window, on the inside. I never liked driving at night, but my roommate Jason always said that road trips felt more magical under the stars. It was early October, that perfect time in Texas when the air finally starts to cool after months of relentless heat. We'd left Austin just before sunset with the plan to camp overnight near Bastrop State Park. Nothing fancy, just a patch of forest, 2 sleeping bags, and a cooler full of gas station snacks. By the time we passed the main park entrance, the light had drained from the sky and the pine trees had begun to lean inward, their tall silhouettes creating a tunnel that felt older than the road itself. We'd missed a turn somewhere. Jason blamed my outdated GPS. I blamed his shortcut. Either way, we ended up on a narrow, unmarked service road, paved with worn asphalt cracked like dry skin. There were no signs, no reflectors, just forest on either side, dense and quiet. I think we should turn around, I said softly, not wanting to sound nervous, though I was. Jason squinted ahead and said, "Now this probably loops back. Just a fire access road or something." We rolled on, slow and cautious. The trees were so close now that branches reached out like fingers, brushing the sides of the car with a dry, whispering sound. The temperature dropped. I cracked the window to breathe in the cool air, thick with the smell of pine needles and damp soil. That's when I saw it. There was a sign, if you could call it that. Just a warped plank nailed to a tree. No writing, just a carving, a winding shape like a sideways S, or maybe a worm? Jason didn't notice. He was humming quietly to himself, drumming his fingers on the wheel. But I turned around to get another look, and the road behind us didn't look the same. It had narrowed, grown darker, as if the shadows had thickened. The trees leaned differently, subtly, but enough that I felt my chest tighten. "Hey," I said, "are you sure this loops back? I don't think we should keep going." Jason glanced over. "What's up? You getting a weird feeling?" I didn't answer right away, because the forest had gone absolutely silent. No crickets, no breeze, not even the rustle of leaves, just the faint hum of our tires on the rough pavement, and then a soft knock. Just one. From the back window. Jason stopped the car. We sat in silence. The knock didn't come again. I turned slowly in my seat, heart thudding, but there was nothing out there, just darkness and the vague outlines of trees. He laughed nervously. "Probably a branch." "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. We drove on for another minute or two. That's when we saw the second sign. This one hung from a crooked wooden post half buried in vines. It was painted this time, faded yellow letters on cracked green wood. Worm Road. Jason frowned. That's gotta be a joke. He slowed the car, and I could hear the crunch of gravel beneath the tires now, sharp and uneven. The pavement had ended. Ahead of us stretched a dirt trail, narrow and wet with patches of old mud. It weaved through the trees like something alive, dipping out of sight. Jason shifted in his seat, glancing at the dashboard. Should we keep going? No, I said, more firmly this time. Seriously, let's just backtrack. He reached to put it in reverse. The car didn't move. He tapped the gas. The tires spun uselessly. Are we stuck? He opened the door and stepped out. I followed. The forest air hit me like cold breath, still and heavy. The car wasn't in mud. The ground was firm. But the tires, they looked wrong. Something had coated them. Not mud, not sap. Worms, hundreds of them. Thin, pink, writhing worms clung to the treads and squirmed beneath the wheels, covering the ground in a slow-moving carpet. I nearly gagged. Jason swore and jumped back. What the hell? We both got back into the car, slamming the doors. He tried to reverse again. Nothing. We were stuck. Then, from the trees came a sound, soft and slow. Crunch, 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 footsteps. Heavy ones, but too slow, like something dragging. I rolled my window up. Jason was frozen, staring into the rearview mirror. There's someone back there, he whispered. I looked. A shape stood in the road maybe 20 feet behind us, tall, wrong. It swayed slightly, as if breathing, but I couldn't make out any features, just long arms, too long, and no face, just smooth, pale skin like bark stripped clean. It didn't move. Jason hit the horn. Nothing happened. Even the headlights had begun to dim, the dashboard flickering like a candle. The silence deepened. I whispered, "Close your eyes." Jason looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't explain. I just knew, deep in my chest somehow, that if we looked too long, we wouldn't leave. We sat like that, eyes shut in the cold, worm-covered dark. I counted heartbeats. Rain began to fall, light, steady drops tapping the roof. When I opened my eyes again, the shape was gone, and the car started. Just like that. Jason didn't say a word as he threw it into reverse. The worms were gone now, too. The road widened as we backed out, and when we turned around, the forest was alive again, with cricket song, wind, and distant rustling leaves. By the time we found the highway, it was past midnight. We drove in silence, the tension unwinding slowly like thread. We never camped that night. We never talked about Worm Road again. But every now and then, when I close my eyes, I still feel that thing watching. Quietly, patiently, waiting for someone else to take the wrong turn. I don't usually tell this story out loud, not because I think anyone would call me crazy, but because the moment I start describing it, it comes back. Not just the memory, the feeling, the hush in the trees, the smell of stone and dried leaves, the sense that if I turned around too fast, I'd see something I'd rather not. But I'm not getting younger, and stories like this don't belong in the grave, so I'll tell you mine. It was late October when I rented the old cabin near Lost Draw Creek in the hill country. A friend of mine owned it, a ramshackle little place tucked between cedar and live oak, down a dirt road so twisted it felt like it doubled back on itself. I needed the time away. After a rough stretch at work and a breakup that left me feeling hollowed out, I just wanted silence. No phone, no news, no people, just wind, maybe rain, and a warm quilt at night. The cabin itself was modest. One room, wood stove, hand pump sink, and a porch with a crooked rocking chair. From that porch, I could just barely make out the dry creek bed down the slope, maybe 50 yards away. A pale scar in the earth, lined with smooth limestone and old roots. It hadn't held water in years, my friend had said. During the day, it was quiet. Not dead quiet, nature had its music. Wind stirring dry branches. A woodpecker tap-tapping in the distance. Crickets, distant cows sometimes. I'd walk the trail along the creek, noting deer tracks, the occasional rabbit, and one strange set of prints I assumed were from a raccoon. Clawed, but wider than I expected. The first night was uneventful. I slept lightly, lulled by the crackle of the stove and the soft ticking of the metal roof cooling under a clear sky. The second night, just past 2 a.m., I woke up to something I thought was an owl call. Low, drawn out, almost human. How elp. That's how it sounded. I sat up, frowning. The fire had burned low. Through the window, the moonlit trees stood still. I told myself it was a barred owl or a fox, some animal making odd noises in the dark. Still, I checked the door. It was locked. I went back to bed. On the third day, I took a closer look at the creek bed. The stones there were smooth and white, some of them flat as plates. But near one exposed root, something caught my eye. Embedded in the limestone was what looked like a row of small teeth. Human teeth. Or at least that's what I told myself. In that first cold moment, 6 of them, perfectly aligned like a fossil, too small for an adult. I crouched, touched one. It was hard, dry, and didn't budge. The stone had grown around it. That night the sounds came back. I was reading by lamplight when I heard it again. Help me. This time clearer. Still distant, but less like a call and more like a plea. I turned off the lamp, opened the window a crack. Outside, the world breathed in silence. Please. The voice was higher, a child's voice now, still coming from down near the creek. I didn't go out. I told myself it was the wind, or some trick of sound in the hills. I repeated it like a prayer. It's just the wind. Just the wind. But that night I didn't sleep well. The fourth night I heard 3 voices, one low and wheezing, one soft and young, and one that sounded like a woman barely above a whisper. They didn't speak at once. They took turns. Please. Down here. It's cold. Don't leave. Over and over, gentle as the wind in the grass. Like a broken record. I sat in bed, covers up to my chest, lamp still on. My mouth was dry and my legs wouldn't move. Eventually, I slept. But it was the kind of sleep where your body rests and your mind stands watch, wide awake. On the 5th morning, I walked to the creek, slowly, cautiously. The sun was bright, but the bed still held shadows. I found something else that time. Near the tooth fossil, someone had carved something into a flat stone. Letters, deep and ragged. Stay with us. I didn't carve it, and I don't think it was there before. I left the next day. Didn't say goodbye to the cabin, didn't lock the door, just loaded up and drove the long road back to town, watching the rear view more than I should have. My friend sold the place last year. Sometimes I wonder if the new owners ever walk down to that dried-up creek, if they ever hear the whispers, or if the voices were for me, just for me. Because some nights, quiet nights just like that one, I still wake up around 2 a.m., and I swear, I hear that child's voice, soft and close, right outside the window. Don't leave. I took the job because I wanted the quiet. Back then, I was tired of the cities, the traffic, the ceaseless buzz of other people's noise. I'd been working long weeks at a job I didn't like in Houston, breathing in a kind of stale, anxious air every day, wondering if this was all life would ever be. Then I saw the listing: seasonal fire lookout needed, Davis Mountains late summer to fall, solitude required. And I thought, that's it. That's what I need. They flew me into Midland and drove me up through Fort Davis in an old state truck. The ranger who dropped me off barely said a word, just gave me a radio, a field notebook, and a ring of keys. He didn't even come all the way up, just waved and drove off as the tower loomed above me in the red dust. And so I was alone. Should say this now, the Davis Mountains are strange, beautiful in that West Texas kind of way, rugged, slow-moving, and dry like bone. But there's something in the shape of them. Something that makes you feel like you're being watched, even when the only thing nearby is a tired mesquite, tree, and a couple of jackrabbits. The lookout tower was tall, wooden, and surprisingly solid for something built back in the 1950s. It sat on a craggy rise overlooking a wide swath of state park, with the mountains layered like frozen waves in all directions. From the top, you could see the land roll away for miles, especially on clear nights, which, despite the season, most of them were. The cabin at the top was small, one bed, one desk, a propane stove, and a logbook filled with decades of past watchers' notes. I liked reading it at night. Some of the entries were boring, temperatures, smoke reports, but others were quieter, stranger. One in particular stuck with me. August 21st, 1978, red flicker in East Basin, 2:44 a.m. Not fire, not lightning. Watching again tomorrow. There were no follow-ups, just that one line, and then a grocery list 2 days later. The first few nights were peaceful. I cooked simple meals, wrote in the log, and watched for smoke by day. Nights were silent except for the crickets, the wind whispering through the wooden slats of the tower, and the occasional distant growl of thunder. I slept better than I had in years. Then the lights began. The first one came on the 6th night, just past 2 a.m. I had just finished logging the weather when something caught my eye, a faint reddish glow far off in the eastern tree line. Too low for stars, too steady for lightning. I watched it for a good 15 minutes. It never moved. Eventually it faded. I noted it in the log. The second night, it came back. Same time, same place. But this time, I swear, it was closer. The light didn't flicker like fire. It pulsed, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat under the trees. I tried using the binoculars, but the distance, the dark, and the dust in the air made it useless. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that someone was out there, holding a lantern just a bit too long, and then turning it off. I didn't sleep that night. The third night, there were two lights, one in the east again, and a new one to the southwest, nestled in a distant fold of canyon. I turned in a slow circle, feeling the creak of the wooden floor beneath my boots scanning the horizon. The lights didn't move, but something felt wrong, like they weren't looking to be seen but had been caught by accident. And now, they were waiting. That night I heard footsteps on the stairs. They came slow, deliberate, like someone barefoot, testing each step. Not the cautious thump of an animal, but the soft, too regular pad of a person. I reached for the radio, but it was quiet. Static, just static. Then the steps stopped, right below the trapdoor. I didn't move. I held my breath for nearly a minute. No knock. No voice. Just silence, stretching so thin I thought I might scream just to break it. Then the steps went back down. I didn't open the door until sunrise. Over the next few days, things frayed. I stopped writing in the log. I kept the lights off at night. I listened, and what I heard was the wind, yes, but underneath it, a sound like whispering, far off, like a conversation happening through a wall. A wind that seemed to be talking, but only when I stopped trying to hear it. I looked through the old logs again. I found 3 more mentions of lights, always in August, always at 2 or 3 a.m. One entry just read, "It's not fire, it waits for cloud cover. I think it can't stand starlight." I began to sleep in short bursts during the day with my boots on. I kept the Firewatch binoculars close, though I barely used them anymore. What was I going to see, really? It was the 12th night that broke me. A storm had been brewing all afternoon. You could feel it in your teeth. The air was heavy and metallic. Thunder rolled in from the north like distant boulders tumbling. Around 1:45 a.m., the rain began. Soft, at first, then louder, then pounding, slamming against the tin roof of the tower, drowning out everything else. For a moment, I was relieved. No lights tonight, no footsteps. Nothing could move in this Then, a knock. Not from the trapdoor this time, from the window. I turned, slow as oil, to see a shape. A figure just outside the glass, even though I was 30 feet above the ground. It stood there, unmoving, face obscured by rain, but its hand was pressed against the glass. Pale, 5 fingers, human. Another knock. Then it was gone. I didn't sleep that night or the next. When the ranger came to relieve me on the 15th day, I was already packed. He didn't ask why I looked pale or why I asked for a ride back early. He just nodded, like he already knew. On the ride down, I asked him if anyone ever saw strange lights up there. He kept his eyes on the road and said, "They all ask that. I've never gone back. I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, when I wake up in the early hours with the wind hissing past my apartment window, I still remember that face at the glass, the lights in the trees, the whispering rain, and I wonder if anyone's watching me now." We weren't looking for anything weird that day. Just some pine trees, a fire pit, and maybe a few marshmallows if the squirrels didn't get into our pack first. My brother Wes and we'd been hiking together since we were kids. Our dad used to take us out into Sam Houston National Forest every fall. Now that he was gone, it felt like something we had to keep doing. A little tradition, a little grief therapy. We'd hike in, stay 2 nights, hike out. Simple. But this time, it didn't stay simple. We set up camp near a dry creek bed just past mile marker 14, not far from a tree with a crudely carved heart in the bark. J.J. Plullis Rena, 96. Wes made a joke about how romantic it was to desecrate federal land. I laughed. That was our last laugh of the weekend. The first night was normal. Cold, but not unbearable. Coyotes howled in the distance like always, and we heard a few twigs snap around 2 a.m., but we chalked it up to deer. The second day, we hiked east. The trail thinned and the woods got thick, so thick we had to push pine branches out of our faces like curtains. At one point, Wes stopped. "You hear that?" he asked. I didn't, but 5 minutes later I did. It was faint, but clear. A creaking sound, like a metal hinge in the wind. We kept walking. A few more steps and we came into a clearing. She was just sitting there. A girl in a cheap Walmart folding chair, maybe 10 years old, with long black hair that hung like soaked seaweed. Pale skin, too pale. Bare feet. A blue hoodie zipped all the way to her chin, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't move when we entered the clearing, didn't blink, didn't turn her head, just sat there in that chair, under the trees, like she'd been planted there by someone or something. Wes said, "Hey kid, you okay?" No answer. He crouched a little, trying to get a better look at her eyes. "Where are your parents?" Still nothing. I stepped forward and reached into my pack for the emergency radio, figuring we'd need to call it in. But that's when she spoke. Her lips didn't move, but we both heard the words, "Don't let it behind you." I turned instantly. Nothing. Just the trail behind us, the trees, the wind. I looked back at her. She was smiling now. Only it wasn't a normal smile. Her lips were still sealed shut, tight, but the muscles of her cheeks, they were tugging upward, stretching skin like someone trying to tear through plastic wrap, and her eyes weren't eyes. They were buttons, 2 large, weathered black buttons, sewn into skin. That's when Wes screamed. I turned again. He was on the ground, crawling backward, eyes wide. "I saw it. I fucking saw it," he said. "Behind me." We didn't wait around, we didn't ask more questions. We ran. But here's the thing. No matter which direction we ran, we always ended up back at the clearing. 4 times. East. West. Even back the way we came. Always that same patch of grass. Same girl. Same chair. But on the 5th time, the chair was empty. No girl. Just the chair. Folded, and the ground underneath it, soaked, dark red, fresh. We hiked out that night. GPS be damned. We just walked in a straight line, cut through brambles, crossed a river, tore our clothes. Took us nearly 9 hours. Wes doesn't talk about it anymore. Me? Sometimes, late at night, I hear a creaking sound just outside my window, like a folding chair, like something getting comfortable, waiting. I've always loved the stars. There's something humbling about lying on your back, out under a wide open sky, the air cooled by the breath of night, listening to nothing but the crickets chirping and the wind rustling dry grass in the distance. Back in late August, I went camping with 3 friends from college, Tommy, Jess, and Ray. We were all astronomy buffs, not professional or anything, just that kind of group that brings telescopes to tailgates and has star chart apps on our phones. That summer, we wanted one last trip before fall semester began, so naturally we chose Enchanted Rock. It's a massive pink granite dome rising out of the hill country, surrounded by stretches of quiet scrubland and sky. No streetlights, no highways, no people, just you and the silence. We got there on a Friday afternoon, pitched our tents a little way off the main trail, and watched the sun drop behind the mesquites. The air smelled like cedar and warm rock, and as dusk settled, the coyotes started singing low out in the hills, mournful and strange but beautiful in their way. Tommy built a small fire while Jess made instant coffee with her camp stove. We talked about nothing mostly, just the kind of chatter you fall into when the phones are off and the sky is beginning to drip with stars. By midnight, it felt like the entire universe had cracked open above us. The Milky Way spilled across the sky like powdered sugar. We laid out on the stone, heads tilted back, taking turns pointing out constellations. There was a quiet breeze, just enough to move the tops of the grasses. It carried the smell of rain, though the clouds were still far off. Then came the blinking. I don't know what else to call it. We were all lying there, me, Jess, Ray, and Tommy, when the stars just went out. Not all at once. It started slow. A shimmer in the sky, like heat off pavement. Then one by one, stars began to vanish. Not dim, not cloud over. They simply blinked off. No moon, no clouds, just emptiness. I remember the silence. It was so complete. It felt wrong. Even the crickets stopped. We were still, too stunned to speak, watching the heavens go dark like someone flipping light switches in no particular order. Then, 11 seconds later, they came back. Every single star right where it had been, as if nothing had happened at all. I think it was Jess who broke the silence. Did you guys see that? Ray let out a nervous laugh, the kind you do when your brain's not sure if it's scared or just confused. Tommy didn't say anything. He just sat up slowly. His face was pale even in the firelight. We tried to make sense of it. Was it an illusion? A trick of the eyes? A cloud formation we didn't notice? Some kind of strange atmospheric effect? But nothing felt right. Nothing explained the total silence that came with it. Eventually, we all just agreed to let it go. We blamed it on being tired, on maybe having stared too long at the sky. The fire was still going, so we made another round of coffee, half joking, half trying to pretend we weren't spooked. Around 1:40 a.m., we started turning in. I remember zipping my sleeping bag and listening to the breeze, softer now. The scent of rain had faded. The night settled back into itself. I woke sometime later to the sound of whispering, not words, just soft tones, like someone was murmuring into their hand a few feet from the tent. I thought it was one of the others. But when I sat up and peeked out of the flap, the fire was dead. The camp was dark. I didn't see anyone. I figured maybe Ray had gotten up to pee, or maybe Jess was having trouble sleeping. I lay back down, but the whispering didn't stop. It seemed to be everywhere. Under the rocks, in the trees, inside the very stillness. When I woke again, it was morning. Warm light filtered through the nylon walls of my tent. The birds were singing. The crickets were back. The world felt normal again, until I stepped outside. There were only 2 tents now. Tommy's was gone. not collapsed or blown over. Gone. In its place, neatly laid on the granite, were his clothes, folded with care. His shirt, pants, shoes, even his socks. Right in the center of where his tent had been. Jess was already awake, staring at them. Ray came stumbling out of his own tent just moments later, squinting into the sunlight. None of us knew what to say. We called his name. We hiked around the area. No signs of struggle, no prints, no blood, no note. His backpack was still under the oak tree, untouched. His phone inside. Eventually, we had to call the park rangers. They questioned us, took our statements. A search was launched, helicopters even. Nothing was ever found. It's been over 2 years now. His disappearance made local news for a week, then vanished into the static like most things do. People love to forget. But I haven't. None of us have. We never figured out what happened that night. No one else saw the stars blink. No one else heard the whispers. Sometimes I still lie awake thinking about how calm everything felt. The smell of granite after dark, the way the crickets fell silent, and how, for 11 quiet seconds, the stars just weren't there. It was one of those still nights in late October, when the wind hushes and the sky feels too wide. The moon hung heavy above the Texas woods, just barely full, casting a chalky light through the bare-limbed trees like it was watching us from behind a veil. We were camped in a clearing just outside Waco, our troop's annual cold-weather hike. You could see your breath, but only just. Enough to make the boys zip up their jackets and huddle close around the orange glow of the fire. There were 9 of us, 6 scouts, 2 junior leaders, and myself, Scoutmaster Ellis. We'd arrived at the trailhead that afternoon, unloaded our gear, and hiked in just under 2 miles. The air was cool and dry, full of brittle grass smells and the dusty musk of fallen oak leaves. We pitched our tents, cooked a simple dinner, and watched the sun slip behind the trees in that slow, golden way it only does in autumn. It was peaceful. Too peaceful, I remember thinking. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. The boys didn't seem to notice, though. They were laughing, telling ghost stories of their own. One of them, Jeremy, I think, brought up an old local legend he'd heard from his older brother. Something about a haunted trail near the Brazos River. They said if you ever heard 3 knocks in the woods, spaced evenly apart, you were never supposed to respond. Never knock back. Never speak. The boys dared each other, of course. Knocked. On tree trunks, clapped behind their backs, all trying to spook each other. I let them have their fun. It's part of the experience. But as the night deepened and the fire turned to embers, that story took on a weight. You could feel it in the way they stopped joking. The trees around us creaked in the windless dark, branches rustling like restless fingers. And far off, so faint it could have been imagined, we heard something knock. Just once. We all paused. It had come from deeper in the woods, maybe 30 yards off. It sounded like someone had struck a dead tree trunk with a flat palm. The kind of dull, hollow knock that carries through forest like it has nowhere else to go. The boys looked at me. I smiled and said it was probably just a deer, or maybe a tree settling. But I felt it in my chest. That sound, like it had been meant for us. We turned in not long after that. I zipped myself into my tent and lay back, listening. The wind had finally picked up, making a low hush through the grass. Crickets chirped in slow, thoughtful patterns. Somewhere an owl hooted, its call soft and mournful. Just when I was drifting off, it happened again. Knock, then silence. And then, maybe a minute later, knock. A little closer this time. Too deliberate for an animal. I sat up in my sleeping bag, heart starting to beat a little faster. I unzipped the tent just an inch and peered out. The fire was nearly out, just red coals now. I could barely make out the silhouettes of the other tents, huddled like sleeping animals in the clearing, and then the third knock. Louder, closer, knock. This time I saw where it came from, somewhere off to the left, just beyond the trees. Too far to see clearly, but close enough that I could hear leaves crunch underfoot like something or someone was pacing slowly just out of view. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I just stayed there, barely breathing, watching. Eventually, the sounds faded. No screams, no cries. Just quiet again. And I thought that was the end of it. The next morning was pale and gray. A cold front had rolled in sometime before dawn, bringing mist that clung low to the ground. The boys were unusually quiet as they packed their things. A few of them looked tired. One or two mentioned weird dreams, but nobody brought up the knocks. That is, until we did the head count. There were only 7 of us. Owen and David, the junior leaders, were missing. Their tents were still zipped shut, sleeping bags unrolled inside, gear untouched. We searched, of course, for hours. Called their names until our voices cracked. I radioed for help and park rangers joined us by afternoon, but there was no trace, not a footprint, not a torn branch. Nothing. They were just gone. Eventually, the official story said they likely got turned around during a nighttime bathroom break and wandered off. But that didn't sit right. Owen was an Eagle Scout. David was practically raised in the woods. They wouldn't have wandered and they wouldn't have left without making a sound. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because something inside me whispered the truth. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a prank. It was something old. Something the trees had known about long before we arrived, and we'd heard its signal. Knock, knock, knock. But we'd made a mistake. Not by knocking back, no. We'd made the mistake by staying after the 3rd one. I never took the troop back there. In fact, I left scouting entirely the next year. Sometimes when the wind's just right and the woods are quiet, I still hear it in my dreams. That measured knocking, coming through the trees like a slow heartbeat, like a door being tapped, softly, again and again, waiting for someone to answer. I don't knock back. I never do. But I still wonder what might happen if I did. I suppose everyone has that one summer they can't quite shake. For me, it was the July I spent at Camp Lone Star, tucked deep in the piney woods of East Texas, where the air smells like sap and soil, and the fog rolls in so thick it could hide a house, or a person, or something else. I was 12, small for my age, shy, the kind of kid who memorized bird calls and kept a notebook of cloud shapes. My parents thought a week away from home, someplace with bonfires and prayer circles, would be good for me. Character building, my dad called it. My mom just kissed my forehead and said, "Oh, watch the sky. You'll always be safe under stars." But I didn't see a single star that week. The camp was nestled against a lake that barely rippled, even in wind. The woods were tall and close, pines mostly, and they gave off a smell that reminded me of forgotten places. Old things. There was always this hum too, just under the crickets. A kind of low static like what you hear when you press a conch, shell to your ear. Our cabin, Cabin Timothy, was the last on the eastern ridge closest to the trees. It slept 6 of us. 4 boys around my age, 1 teen counselor named Brady, and an empty bed no one ever used. We all said it was broken, but I noticed none of us liked looking at it after sundown. The days passed gently, hikes, chapel time, fishing if you didn't mind the leeches. I liked the quiet between activities, sitting on the dock with my sketch pad, drawing dragonflies and bark textures. The older kids played capture the flag or sang praise songs at the mess hall. Everything felt ordinary, a little old-fashioned maybe, but peaceful, until the fog came. It started on the 3rd night. I remember because the frogs didn't sing. That's what I noticed first, the absence of sound. You don't realize how much noise nature makes until it stops all at once, like someone hit pause. The fog rolled in just after lights out, around 9:30. It came in slow, curling between trees like spilled milk, stretching over the lake like it was trying to hide the water. Brady stood at the cabin window for a long time. I remember seeing his shape outlined in the glow of his flashlight. held against the glass like he was trying to see something through the mist. He didn't say anything. The next morning, he looked tired, pale. We asked him if he saw anything in the woods, and he just smiled a little and said, "Don't wander at night, all right? Even if you think you hear someone calling you." Then he went back to tying fishing knots. The fog came again the next night, and the next, and every night after that. It wasn't just fog, though. Not really. There were shapes in it. The first time I noticed them, I was walking back from the bathhouse, maybe 9:15. The fog was just beginning to spill out of the trees. I heard a twig snap and turned, thinking it was another camper. But what I thought I saw, was a tall figure, impossibly thin, standing just beyond the fire circle, not moving, not blinking, just watching. It might have been a tree trunk, or a shadow, or a trick of the mist. But when I blinked, it was gone. After that, I started waking up around 2 or 3 a.m. every night. Always the same. The silence, the weight of the air, the cold that didn't feel like weather cold, but something else. Like standing in front of a refrigerator with the door open too long. One night I heard footsteps, slow, soft ones, not crunching the pine needles like boots, but whispering over them like someone barefoot. I sat up. Brady was standing at the window, again. He didn't turn when I whispered his name. Outside, lining the edge of the woods, were figures, not campers, not animals. They were too tall, too still, and there were too many of them. Maybe a dozen, maybe more. You couldn't quite count them, the way the fog bent light. They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, just watching the cabins. Silent, unmoving. One of them was facing our window. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, Brady looked worse. Sunken eyes, shaky hands. I asked him quietly if he saw them too. He nodded, once, didn't speak. That night, he moved his cot to the middle of the room and pulled it as far from the windows as possible. None of us talked about the shapes again. We didn't need to. The final night of camp, the fog came early, before sunset. It rolled in thick, covering the lake like a quilt, slipping between tree trunks and cabin steps. The air was heavy with it, cool and damp like wet laundry. Chapel was canceled. The counselors said there was a weather advisory, though no storm ever came. We were told to stay in our cabins, lights out early, no wandering, but around midnight the bell rang. You know the kind, those old iron triangle bells on a rope, hung from a post near the mess hall. They only rang it for emergencies, except no one was out there to ring it. The sound echoed through the woods once, twice, 3 times, and then stopped. We huddled in our bunks, listening. From my bed, I could see the window, and from the window, I could see them. More this time. Not just a dozen, not just watching. They were closer, standing on the path, lining the dirt road, almost at the steps. All thin, all facing the cabins. One stood just outside the door, its head tilted slightly, as if listening. And then, just as quickly as they had come, the fog shifted. Like a breeze passed through, and they were gone. The next morning, the sun was out for the first time in days, bright, warm, birds singing. Brady didn't speak at breakfast. He didn't eat. His hands shook when he poured his coffee. When our parents picked us up, the counselors handed out framed photos of our cabin group, taken the first day before the fog, smiling faces. Peaceful woods. Only in the very back, half hidden by a pine tree, there was a shape, tall, thin, staring straight at the camera. I've never been back to Camp Lone Star. I don't think it even runs anymore. The website went dark years ago. The phone number is disconnected. Sometimes I think about that final night, about the way the fog knew where to go, about how the shapes stood still, so still, like they were waiting for something, watching, choosing. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the air feels heavy, I dream of pines and whispering, footsteps, And when I do, I never look out the window. Not anymore. It's strange how memories cling to certain places. You can forget a name, even a birthday, but somehow the smell of pine needles after rain, or the sound of wind moving through a certain hollow, that never leaves you. I was 17 when we carved our initials into that tree, the summer before senior year, a last hurrah in the Davy Crockett National Forest. The three of us, me, Levi, and Jonah. We'd been best friends since middle school, tight as bark on a tree, as Levi used to say. I think that's what made what happened so hard to understand. It was August, the kind of late summer that already tastes like fall. Dry leaves, cicadas in the heat. We were camping just off a trail not too many people knew, somewhere deep, past a dry creek bed and a rusted sign that just said, "Gov property, do not trespass." We thought it was funny. The boundary line felt like a dare. So we set up camp just past it, under a tall canopy of pine and sweet gum. That's where we found the tree. It was dead, blackened bark, hollow in the middle, like something had hollowed it out with care. I remember thinking it looked like a chimney or a throat. Its branches were long gone and it tilted slightly, almost like it was leaning in to listen. Levi, ever the mischief maker, said we should leave a mark, a memory. "It'll be our pact," he said. "Three of us, always." He pulled out his pocket knife and carved his initials, LR, then Jonah, then me. Just beneath them, Levi etched a crude triangle, looping our letters together. We laughed, took a Polaroid, ate cold baked beans from the can, drank cheap soda, and listened to the sounds of the forest winding down. Crickets, distant frogs, the slow hush of night. That was the last time we were all together. I didn't think much about that trip until a year later. By then, Jonah was gone. He'd been hiking alone in the same woods, trying to photograph barred owls, he said. They found his pack beside the trail. Not torn up, not bloodied, just sitting there like he'd set it down and walked away. The search lasted 4 days. Dogs, helicopters, nothing. No one ever found his body. Levi didn't take it well. He started sleeping during the day, drinking at night, calling me with strange questions. "Do you ever dream about the tree?" he asked once out of the blue. Like, not a dream, but more like something watching you through a dream. He swore something had been following him. He said it smelled like moss and burnt wood. That he'd wake up with dirt under his nails, pine needles in his sheets. I didn't know what to say. 3 weeks later, Levi was dead. Car accident. They said he was driving too fast through a curve near Ratcliffe Lake. Hit a tree. Not the tree, but still. It felt like something circling back. That left me. And that's when the tapping began. It was soft at first. Just a few knocks on the window every few nights. Always around 3 a.m. Not hard, not urgent. Just a gentle tap, tap, tap like fingers or maybe nails. The first time I checked, I thought it was a branch. Wind, maybe. But the tree outside my bedroom window is a good 4 feet away from the glass. No branches near it. And the second time, it was raining. No wind. Still, the tapping came. Then one night, it spoke. Not loudly. Just a whisper, low and cracked like wind through dry leaves. "Let me in." It was Jonah's voice. Or at least, something trying to be Jonah. The inflection was wrong. Like someone repeating words phonetically, without understanding them. Another night, it was Levi. Laughter first, then tapping, then the voice. "You said we'd always be together." I started keeping my windows locked, curtains drawn. I even moved my bed to the other side of the room. But it didn't matter. The voices came anyway, always soft, always just outside. Sometimes they say things I can't understand, broken sentences almost like static on an old radio. Other times they repeat themselves over and over. One night I swear they whispered our initials, over and over, LR. Jem AK LR Jem AK. That was the night I found the photo again. I hadn't seen it since the trip. It was tucked inside an old book I hadn't opened in years. Texas wildflowers of all things. The Polaroid of us in front of that dead tree only. Something was wrong. There were 4 sets of initials on the trunk now. LRJMAK. The 4th was carved below the triangle, just barely visible. A single character. It looked like an eye. Or maybe just a circle with a vertical line through it. I don't know what it means. Last night I dreamed of the forest again, not like before. This time it was cold. Early winter, maybe late November. No leaves. The tree was still there. But now something was inside it. I couldn't see it clearly, just movement. Slow, rhythmic, like breathing. When I woke up, there was dirt on my floor, pine needles stuck to my socks, and the tapping started again. But this time it came from inside the house. I haven't gone back to Davy Crockett. I don't think I ever will. Some things once marked don't stay buried. Some pacts hold tighter than they should. If you ever find a dead tree, hollow and leaning, with initials carved in the bark, walk away. Don't touch it. Don't look inside. And above all else, don't add your name. I don't usually talk about this, not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, but because I still don't quite believe it myself. It happened 3 years ago, though it still feels like last night. I was out in East Texas, not far from Jasper, deep in the piney woods. You can't see the stars too well out there, too many branches overhead. But on a clear night, you can still feel the sky pressing down through the treetops. Cold, wide, and heavy. It was late October, one of those weeks where the air has a bite in the morning but turns gentle by noon. The kind of weather that makes you want to wear flannel and keep a thermos full of black coffee by your side. I'd set up camp about 5 miles from the nearest forest road, on land a buddy of mine leased out for hunting. He wasn't planning to go that weekend, so I took the chance to have the woods to myself. Just me, the trees, and a borrowed CB radio to keep me company. I like solitude. I'm not the social kind of hunter. I don't go for trophies either. Just enjoy the silence, the peace, the act of walking quietly through the underbrush, letting the forest decide whether you deserve to see anything at all. That night had started off as peaceful as any I've ever known. My tent was set up by a small, dry creek bed, nothing but smooth stones and damp leaves. The air was crisp and clean, tinged with pine sap and the faint distant smell of wood smoke. Crickets chirped low in the brush. A light wind whispered through the trees, not strong enough to move the branches, just enough to rustle the needles and bring the smell of damp earth into the air. By 9 p.m., the forest had settled into its nighttime rhythm. I sat by the low glow of my fire, radio resting on a log next to me, flipping through channels out of habit more than anything. Mostly static, the occasional trucker voice far out of range, and one preacher reading scripture somewhere around, channel 19. Then around 10:15 I heard it, a child's voice, very faint, cutting through the static. Help me. It came so softly I thought I imagined it. You know how your ears can play tricks on you when you're alone in the dark? You expect noise and sometimes your brain obliges. I turned the knob slowly, thinking maybe I'd landed on someone's prank transmission or a recording. But the signal was gone. I didn't think much of it, chalked it up to a passing signal or some kind of bleed over. CBs can be quirky like that. Still, I kept the radio nearby, just in case. I climbed into my sleeping bag around 11:00, the embers of the fire glowing like distant coals through the mesh flap of the tent. Sleep came slowly. The forest was so quiet it almost pressed in on you. Not threatening, just dense, heavy, still. Then, sometime after midnight, the radio crackled again. Help me. Louder this time. Clearer. Definitely a child's voice. Couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. No panic, just soft pleading. Please. Help me. I sat up fast, heartbeat kicking up. Fumbled for the flashlight, clicked it on, and unzipped the tent. The night outside was unchanged. No movement, No breeze. The fire was almost out, reduced to a faint shimmer of red buried under white ash. The radio sat on the log, faint static hissing. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said. "Is someone out there?" Static. I tried again. "Where are you?" Then it came again, so quiet I had to hold the speaker up to my ear. "In the pines." That was it. Just that. In the pines. Now you should know I'm not a man easily rattled. I've worked in logging camps, oil fields, done time as a park warden in my 20s. But something in that voice, it felt off. Not scared, not injured. More like it was calling for someone it already knew was coming. I could have turned the radio off, crawled back into my tent, but I didn't. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my boots, and took my flashlight. Left the fire pit behind, the tent behind, and started walking toward the denser trees to the east, the direction the voice had seemed to come from. It was around 1 a.m. when I passed the tree line. That part of the woods is older. Pines tall enough to vanish into the dark, their needles thick like carpet beneath your boots. The only sound was the crunch of my own steps. Even the crickets were silent. I kept scanning the woods with my light, calling out every now and then. "Hello? I heard you on the radio. Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" No answer, just the wind. 10 minutes in, I lost my sense of direction. The radio hissed softly at my hip. No more voices, just static again. I stopped near a hollow log to catch my breath, heart beating faster than I liked. Then I heard it, this time not through the radio. A faint voice, just ahead of me. The same tone, same childlike cadence. "Help me." Only now it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the woods. I called out, louder this time, but got no response. I moved forward slowly. The trees were too thick here. My flashlight barely cut through, and every step I took seemed to get softer, like the pine needles were swallowing the sound. Then I noticed something strange. The air didn't smell like pine anymore. It smelled like static. It's hard to explain unless you've smelled ozone during a lightning storm. That kind of electric tang that makes your nose feel dry and sharp. That's what it was, like a radio station come to life in the back of my throat. And then everything stopped. Not just the voice, everything. No wind, no distant owls, not even the hum of bugs. Just dead silence. And in that silence, I saw something ahead, between the trees. A pale shape, like a small figure, standing perfectly still. Raised my flashlight and aimed it forward. Nothing, just trees. I don't remember turning around, but I did. I started walking back the way I'd come. Fast. Not running. Just steady, quiet steps. I didn't want to draw attention. Whatever I'd heard, whatever I'd almost seen, I knew it didn't want help. It wanted company. By the time I saw the faint orange glow of my fire pit, I nearly collapsed. The walk back felt twice as long. I zipped myself into the tent and turned the radio off. Didn't sleep a wink. Morning came gray and wet. A fog had rolled in. I packed up fast and hiked back to the road without eating breakfast. I never told my buddy what happened. I never went back. But sometimes, when I'm up late and the wind's just right, I'll flip through CB frequencies at home. Just to check. Just to see, and every now and then, just for a second, I swear I still hear it. "Help me, oh in the pines." I've always loved the woods at night. There's a certain kind of silence you get out there that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not the silence of a city asleep or the dead quiet of an empty house. It's a breathing kind of silence. Like the trees and the wind and the crickets are all part of a slow living rhythm. It was late October when my partner Maddie and I went out for our last camping trip of the season. The air was just starting to turn cool at night. Cool enough for flannel, but not so cold you'd want a fire going all night. We'd driven out from Houston, leaving behind the hum of traffic and the smell of exhaust for the cleaner, darker calm of the Sam Houston National Forest. We didn't pick a site at the main campground. Maddie liked more remote spots, so we took a side trail off a gravel road that wound deep into the pines, where the trees grew tight together and moss dangled in curtains. You could walk for hours without seeing anyone else out there. And that was the point. By the time we set up our tent, it was nearly sunset. The last light of the day filtered down through the trees, gold and dusty, catching on spider webs and floating dust motes. We cooked dinner in quiet, just a little rice and beans on a tiny propane burner, and sat listening to the first sounds of night come alive. Crickets, owls, the soft hush of wind moving through dry pine needles. It was peaceful. One of those moments you want to bottle up and keep for later. And then we found the tarp. We'd gone for a short walk before bed just to stretch our legs and shake off the stiffness from the drive. Maddie always brought a little red flashlight that clicked like a ballpoint pen, and she liked pointing it between the trees like she was exploring ruins. About 10 minutes from our site, we found a narrow side trail we hadn't noticed earlier. It was barely a path at all, more like the suggestion of one. Maddie wanted to see where it led. The light had almost completely gone by then. The moon hadn't risen yet, and the sky was that deep blue-black ink that makes every tree look like a silhouette. The air was cooling fast and the smell of pine sap and old leaves was strong. The path curved gently downhill, and then, there it was. A green tarp stretched between two trees. It was big, maybe 8 feet long, and nailed at the corners to the bark. It sagged slightly in the middle like it had been there a while. The color was that dull forest green you see in army surplus stores, but slicker somehow, almost wet-looking in the beam of our flashlight. Maddie said something like, "Weird," and stepped forward. I don't know why, but I didn't follow her. The second she got close enough to touch it, she stopped. "It's sticky," she said, not confused, not scared, just curious. I asked her if it was sap, or maybe tree pitch. But when she rubbed her fingers together, she frowned. "It's warm," she said, "like body temperature warm." That got me moving. I stepped up beside her and touched it myself. She was right. It was too warm for how cold the air had gotten, and it wasn't sap. It felt like jelly. No smell. Just this thick, warm residue, like the tarp had been sweating something out, and then we saw it. A dark stain near the center, maybe the size of a dinner plate. It wasn't glossy like the rest, it was matte, and deep red, like dried blood. Now I've been around animals. I've seen hog traps and deer blinds gone wrong. I've helped clean game with my cousins. I know what dried blood looks like, but this wasn't caked or flaked or rust-colored. It was still weeping, like the tarp was bleeding, slow and steady. Maddie leaned in again and I grabbed her wrist. I didn't mean to, but I did. Hard. "We should go," I said. She didn't argue. The walk back felt longer than it had coming in. The forest was darker now and the wind had picked up. Every branch creaked. The moss swayed like hair underwater. We didn't talk. That night in the tent, I couldn't sleep. Maddie had passed out fast, curled in her sleeping bag with her back to me. But I lay there, eyes open, listening, to the wind, to the creak of branches, to the occasional rustle, too heavy for a rabbit, too soft for a deer. Once I thought I heard something wet, like a rag being wrung out slowly. But maybe that was my imagination. In the morning, we packed up without saying much. Coffee was bitter. Neither of us mentioned the tarp. But when we hiked back down the main trail toward the truck, we passed the little path again, and the tarp was gone. No nails in the tree bark. No damp patch on the ground. Just empty space between the trees. Maddie asked if maybe we'd taken a different route back, but we hadn't. We'd even marked a tree with a piece of red paracord the night before. It was still there, right at the turnoff, but no tarp. I don't know what we saw that night. I've looked online, I've asked rangers. I've told the story at a couple backyard bonfires. The best anyone could offer was that maybe it was some kind of hunting blind, maybe soaked in animal blood. But it wasn't just blood. It wasn't just a tarp. It wasn't right. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about how warm it was, like it had been waiting, like it had a heartbeat. And I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed longer, if we'd come back later, if Maddie had touched it just a little too long. But I don't go back out that way anymore. Not since that night. The forest still calls to me sometimes, especially when the wind moves through the trees just right. But I listen from home now, where the walls don't bleed and the tarps don't breathe. The lake always felt like a second home to me. My uncle used to say Possum Kingdom was God's own fishing hole, carved out of the Texas hills to catch the prayers of old men and the lies of young ones. I used to laugh when he said that because he was the best liar of us all, claiming he once hooked a bass bigger than his dog. But that's the thing about this lake. It's beautiful enough to make you believe even the most unbelievable stories. It was late August when I decided to head out there again, just before the summer began to turn. The air was thick and warm, but not suffocating. It was one of those nights where the breeze carries the smell of cedar and water, earthy, heavy, and clean. The crickets sang like they were trying to lull the hills to sleep. Every so often, a bullfrog chimed in from the shallows near the dock. It was the kind of night you feel more than you hear. I went out with my buddy Clay. We'd known each other since high school, and fishing at Possum Kingdom had become a sort of ritual, an excuse to stay up too late, swap old stories, and drink cheap beer under the stars. Clay brought his grandfather's old aluminum boat, the one with the dent in the bow and the squeaky oarlocks. We pushed off from the marina just after midnight and headed west toward the cliffs. There's a spot under the old concrete bridge. Locals call it Devil's Bend, though no one ever really says why. The bridge doesn't carry much traffic anymore, just the occasional rancher or lost tourist looking for a campsite. Beneath it, the water runs deep and dark. It's quiet there too, like even the frogs know not to croak too loud. We anchored the boat, cut the engine, and let the current pull us gently into the shadows under the bridge. The night wrapped around us like a heavy blanket. There were no headlights on the road above, just the creak of the rope as we rocked slowly, the tick of water against the hull, and the occasional splash of fish beneath us. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. Sometimes silence says more than any story could. Then Clay said something that made the air change. "You ever hear about the red eyes?" I looked at him, and his face was half in shadow, lit only by the glow of his lantern. He didn't smile when he asked. I shook my head. He nodded toward the cliffs where the limestone rose up jagged and sheer from the water's edge. They say on nights like this, when the wind stops and the water goes still, you can see them. 2 red lights up on the cliff. Don't blink. Don't look away, because if they vanish, that means it's not up there anymore. He let the words hang between us like a dare. I laughed, quiet and uneasy. "You're full of it." Clay didn't answer. He just pointed. I turned my head and looked. There, near the top of the cliff, nestled in the brush and rock, were 2 faint red dots glowing like distant coals. I blinked hard. Maybe it was taillights, a hiker with a headlamp, or some trick of the lantern reflecting off the wet stone. But the lights didn't move. They hovered, motionless, watching. "Could be a fox," I said, though my voice didn't sound convinced. "Or a bird, some kind of animal." Clay just stared. "Foxes don't watch you like that." We sat there, not speaking, not moving, for what felt like minutes. The water had gone still, like glass stretched tight over the deep. Even the crickets had quieted. The only sound was the whisper of the wind across the bridge beams above. And then the lights vanished. Not faded, not flickered. They just went out. Clay swore under his breath and grabbed the lantern. "Time to go." We pulled the anchor, hands suddenly clumsy and shaking. The oarlocks groaned as we turned the boat. I glanced up at the cliffs one last time. Nothing. Just black rock and darker sky. But then came the sound. A scraping. Long, slow, hollow. It came from beneath the bridge. I froze, mid-row. Clay did too. The boat drifted silently into the shadow, cast by the arching concrete. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection, or a shadow cast by the lantern. But no, this thing had weight, shape. It was crawling. Something was moving along the underside of the bridge upside down like an insect, its limbs bent at the wrong angles, knees and elbows like knotted tree branches. Its body was long and lean, silhouetted against the faint silver of the moonlit water. It moved without sound, except for the occasional scraping of nails or claws against the concrete. And just as the boat drifted directly beneath it, it stopped, hung there, motionless, watching. I didn't see a face. Not exactly. But where its head tilted down toward us, I saw the same two red dots, burning low and steady in the dark. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. Clay reached slowly for the lantern and I shook my head. No, don't move. We waited like that for nearly a minute. Then the wind picked up again. Just a light breeze, but it was enough to stir the trees and send ripples across the water. The thing above us moved again, impossibly fast, skittering back into the darkness under the bridge. The red eyes blinked, out, and then it was gone. We rowed in silence, not saying a word until the lights of the marina came into view. When we hit the dock, we didn't tie up the boat, just left it there, rocking gently. I never went back to Devil's Bend after that. Clay moved to Amarillo a year later and we lost touch. Sometimes, though, on still nights I dream of the water. I hear that scraping sound, and I remember those eyes, and when I do, I leave the lights on, just in case it followed us back. It was the kind of night that settles in your bones, the kind where even the air feels tired. I was camping in East Texas, somewhere just past the edge of Davy Crockett National Forest, where the trees grow close together and the soil is soft, with fallen pine needles. It was late October, and the wind had just begun to carry that early whisper of winter, the kind that rattles dry leaves and turns your breath visible, even in the dark. We had come out here, myself and two old college friends, Jake and Marissa, for one last camping trip before the cold truly set in. Just a long weekend, a fire, some beers, and a chance to unplug. We weren't the kind of people who camped often. Jake brought the tent, Marissa brought the food, and I brought the portable speaker that ended up dying after one song. But we didn't mind. The silence out there was thick and kind. You could hear the crickets and the owls, the distant call of some bird long after dark. The first night passed easily. We talked around the fire until the coals gave up their glow, then drifted off to sleep with our backs against the cool earth. I remember waking up once in the early morning, maybe around 3 a.m., and hearing something, not quite a whisper, but close, more like breath, like wind moving just above the forest floor, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The next day we explored. No map, no plan, just slow walking through rustling leaves and pine needles so thick they muted our steps. The trees out there have a way of leaning close, like they're listening. Jake had a walking stick and kept poking around at roots looking for snakes. Marissa had brought her old Polaroid and kept snapping blurry pictures of moss, tree knots, and once, a spider's web so perfect it looked fake. It was late afternoon when we found the tree. It stood alone in a clearing, maybe 30 or 40 feet across where no other tree dared grow. It looked wrong. Not dead, not exactly, but pale. Its bark was almost silvery like the skin of a birch, but smooth and unbroken without the usual texture. And it didn't make sound in the wind. No creaking, no rustling, just silence. Marissa walked right up to it. She touched the surface and said, "It's soft." I laughed. "Soft? Like spongy?" "No," she said, turning to us. "Like skin." Jake and I exchanged a look. He stepped closer, pulled out the knife from his pack and, not maliciously, just out of curiosity, pressed the blade gently against the bark. What came away was a curl, a clean peel like fruit, and beneath it was flesh, smooth, pinkish, warm, moist with some kind of clear fluid that glistened before it vanished into the cool air. The patch we'd revealed was no bigger than a hand, but none of us could look away from it. There were no veins, no hair, just perfect human-like skin under a layer of tree bark. "I think we should go back," I said quietly. Nobody argued. That night, the forest changed. It wasn't obvious at first, but as the sun disappeared and the fire began to crackle in the pit Jake had dug, we noticed the quiet. The crickets had stopped. No wind, no birds. Even the leaves on the trees seemed to still themselves. And then came the breathing. Soft, slow. Inhale, exhale. As if something enormous and invisible was laying just beyond the reach of our firelight, half buried in pine needles. I thought it was my imagination until Marissa whispered, "Do you hear that?" Jake nodded. "It's been going on for like 10 minutes. The sound didn't move. It didn't get closer or louder. Just stayed where it was. Constant. Calm. Breathing. We didn't sleep well that night. The third day, we didn't talk much. None of us brought up the tree. We just stayed near the site, fiddled with firewood, and counted the hours until morning. The forest felt watchful. More than that, it felt attentive, as if something had noticed us and was still deciding what to do. At dusk, I walked to the edge of the woods to relieve myself. That's when I saw the bark. It was lying on the ground, a small, curled piece, identical to the one Jake had peeled off the tree. But this one was fresh, the inside still slick, with moisture, warm in my hand. I looked up. There, about 30 feet away, was another tree. Only this one hadn't been there yesterday. I was sure of it. I stepped closer. The trunk was narrow, smooth, silver. Its bark shimmered faintly in the dying light, and when I leaned in to touch it, when my fingers met the surface, it exhaled. Not loudly, just enough to move the hairs on my arm. We left before dawn, didn't even pack properly. We just stuffed what we could into our bags, doused the fire, and made for the trailhead with our flashlights cutting through mist and shadow. None of us spoke. I think we were afraid that if we did, if we acknowledged what had happened, it would follow us home more directly. We still text sometimes, the three of us. Nobody talks about going back. We just share the occasional blurry photo or weird article about local folklore. Jake moved to the city. Marissa started taking black and white photos again. And me? I've had dreams of trees with skin, of forests that breathe, of something just beyond the firelight, waiting, patiently, for us to return. Even now, in my quiet house, with the doors locked and the lights low, I swear I hear it. A long, slow breath, inhale. Exhale, like something enormous just under the surface of the world, sleeping lightly beneath the bark, waiting. It was late October when I first saw him. The trees had begun their slow transformation, shedding dusty orange and burnt red leaves into the damp undergrowth. In Huntsville, the woods breathe differently in autumn. The nights stretch a little. Longer, the wind curls around your ears like an old song you almost remember, and the pine needles collect in thick, hushed carpets that silence your steps. I was working the late shift, volunteer ranger duty for Sam Houston National Forest. I'd done it for years. There's a certain calm that settles over the woods after dusk. Most folks are terrified of the dark. But me? I liked it. The chill. The stillness. The way the stars seem to lean in closer once the sun's gone. Some nights you could hear nothing but the rhythmic creak of the trees and the distant call of barred owls. That particular evening, it had just rained. The dirt trails were soft and smelling of moss and cedar. I'd been walking the loop near Deadwood Trail, flashlight in hand, boots sinking slightly with every step. Just a routine sweep, making sure no campers had strayed past curfew, checking, the trail markers breathing in that damp, sweet October air. Then I saw the light. It flickered low through the trees, amber and warm, like the glow of an old oil lantern. Not the sharp beam of an LED or the flicker of a phone screen. This was something different, something older. At first I figured it was a hiker heading out late, or maybe an older camper using vintage gear, but the light didn't move like someone walking. It swayed. Not left and right like a person shifting their arms, but forward and back, like it was being pulled by something just out of view. I stood still for a moment. The wind rustled the branches above me. A soft drip-drip of rainwater fell from the canopy. Crickets resumed their song around me, undisturbed. I called out, "Evenin'. You folks need help getting back to the trailhead?" No answer. Just the wind, and that distant amber flicker, now slowly dimming behind a wall of pine trunks. I took a few steps forward, but something in my gut pulled me back. Not fear, not yet. Just that subtle, primal hesitation we get when something doesn't quite fit into the shape it's supposed to. That night, I chalked it up to swamp gas or someone playing a prank. I walked the loop twice more before heading back to the ranger station. Still, when I turned out the lights and tried to sleep, I could see the glow behind my eyelids, swinging gently, as if inviting me deeper. The second time I saw him, it was raining. A soft, persistent drizzle that coated the leaves and turned the forest floor into a patchwork of mud and standing water. I was out again, same trail, same shift. I'd almost forgotten the first encounter until I rounded the bend past marker 7 and saw the light, closer this time. The lantern bobbed between two trees, not 10 yards off the trail. I could almost make out the shape holding it. Not a man. Exactly. A silhouette, long coat, wide-brimmed hat, barely more than a suggestion against the darker backdrop of the trees. No face I could see. No sound of footsteps on the soaked earth. I called out again. "You all right out there?" The light paused, then slowly started to recede. Not away from me, but into the forest. As if sinking into it, I didn't follow. Instead, I stood there, boots rooted in wet leaves, heart thudding softly under my jacket, and listened. There was something in the quiet that didn't belong. A rhythm beneath the natural sounds of the night. A breath, maybe, or a low hum. I stayed until the light vanished. When I got home that night, I noticed something odd. A sound. Faint at first. Like the crackle of firewood from far away, or the whisper of static. I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, listening. It didn't stop. It never has. Weeks passed. The sightings continued. Always the same. The lantern, the figure, never close enough to make out his face, never far enough that I could forget. One night just before Thanksgiving, I left the trail. I know I shouldn't have, but something in me snapped. Curiosity, maybe, or a strange longing. I needed to see him, really see him. I stepped off the marked path and followed the glow, boots slipping in mud, branches clawing at my jacket. He led me in a slow, winding path through parts of the forest I'd never been to, places not on the park maps. Eventually, the trees thinned, and I stepped into a clearing. It was silent. No crickets, no wind, just the figure, standing on the far side, the lantern swaying like a heartbeat. I squinted, trying to make out his features, but the light distorted everything. Made his face too long, too still, too hollow. And then he lifted the lantern, just a little as if in greeting. I didn't wave back. When I turned around, the forest was unfamiliar. The trail gone. The path I'd followed erased behind me. It took me 3 hours to find my way back. I don't walk that trail anymore. I asked to be transferred to office duty, mostly desk work now. The forest doesn't feel the same to me. It's like something in it changed, or maybe something in me did. But here's the strangest part. I still hear him. Every night, without fail, when the house goes dark and the world gets quiet, I hear the soft creak of a lantern swing somewhere outside my window. Not footsteps, not breathing, just that slow rhythmic sway. Back and forth, like a lullaby. I've tried moving. Twice, in fact. 2 different towns, miles apart. But the sound follows, not louder, not closer, just always there. Sometimes when the wind is still and the night is deep enough, I swear I can see the faintest glow down the hallway or outside in the trees. I don't try to explain it anymore. Some things just stay with you, like a memory. Or a shadow, or a man with a lantern walking a trail that never ends. Good night. Sleep well. And if you hear something swinging gently in the dark, don't look. Just let it pass. I was somewhere west of Alpine, Texas, camped out in a little arroyo that cut through the scrub like a dried-up scar. I'd been driving for 2 days straight, no real destination in mind, just me, my pickup, a sleeping bag, and enough water to keep from shriveling up. Early fall is kind to West Texas. The days are warm and wide, the sky impossibly blue, and the nights, well, the nights are something else entirely. That evening had started quietly. The sunset threw long amber streaks across the desert floor, turning the distant hills into dark silhouettes. I'd pitched my tent between 2 low mesquites and let the dusk settle like a blanket. Crickets ticked in the brush. A pair of coyotes yipped somewhere far off. Everything felt dry and clean and hollow in that desert kind of way, like the world had exhaled and was waiting to inhale again. I had no cell service and I didn't miss it. The silence out there is complete. Not just a lack of noise, but a presence of something older than speech. The kind of silence that listens back. Around 10, I crawled into my sleeping bag and zipped it halfway up. The tent flapped gently in the breeze and I drifted off to the sound of sand brushing across nylon. No dreams. Just the kind of deep sleep that comes when you're far away from roads and wires and city lights. But sometime past midnight, I woke up. Not suddenly. Nothing jarring. Just one of those slow, drifting wake-ups where you're not sure if your eyes are open yet. The air inside the tent had gone still. Heavy. I remember realizing it was quiet in a different way now. The crickets had stopped. That was the first thing. No chirping, no rustling, not even the occasional distant coyote. Just thick, padded silence, like the desert was holding its breath. Then came the wind. Not a gust, not a breeze. A crawling wind, low and steady, brushing over the ground like fingers across a drumhead. I could hear it moving through the sand and dry brush. It didn't howl or whistle. It hissed. It hissed like a rattlesnake. At first I thought it was in my head, some half-awake trick of the ears. But it grew stronger, circling the tent in a slow, deliberate way. A whispering wind, sliding beneath the nylon walls, licking along the seams. I pulled the sleeping bag tighter and tried to calm my breathing. That's when I noticed the smell. It was subtle, like old copper and sun-baked iron. The scent of rocks cracked open under pressure. It made my nose twitch and my tongue feel dry. I thought about unzipping the tent and looking outside, but something in my gut told me not to. The wind picked up again, still not loud, but sharp now, more precise. It felt like it knew exactly where I was. I could hear the sand shifting, tiny grains tapping like rain against the tent wall. And then, I heard it, right beside me. A faint rhythmic rattle, soft and unmistakable. Not a snake. I told myself, just the wind in my imagination playing tricks. But the rattle came again, followed by a sound like something dragging across the outside of the tent. Slow, steady, deliberate. My skin crawled. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited. Minutes passed. Eventually, the wind died down, tapering off like someone walking away into the distance. The hissing faded. The tent stopped rustling. And just like that, the desert silence returned. I must have fallen asleep again, because when I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. Pale blue light, stretched across the hills. Everything looked the same. The crickets were back. A hawk circled lazily overhead. I stepped outside and stretched, shaking off the strange tension in my shoulders. Then I looked down at my arm. 3 small marks. Perfectly round, dark red, just below the elbow. Not scratches, not scrapes, punctures. Tiny, clustered. Bites, but not from a snake. I'd know a snake bite. These were too small, too precise, like something probing. The area was numb, but not painful. I pressed around the skin, but there was no swelling, no heat, no sign of poison or infection. Just those 3 neat little dots like someone or something had leaned in close while I slept and tasted me. I broke camp quickly. Didn't eat breakfast. Didn't stay to enjoy the view. I threw everything into the truck, kicked up a storm of gravel and didn't look back. That was 6 months ago. The bites never fully faded. They're still faintly there. 3 small marks in the same place. Some nights I wake up at 2:47 a.m. sharp, always the same time, always to silence. And I swear, if I lie still enough, I can hear it again. That soft, slithering wind brushing against the glass of my bedroom window. Whispering, waiting. I used to work as a seasonal ranger at Lick Creek Park just outside College Station, Texas. Not one of those towering, dramatic landscapes like Big Bend or the Hill Country parks. Lick Creek is quieter, a little flat. The trails loop gently through post oaks and cedar, with lazy turns and dry creeks. The kind of place where people walk their dogs and teenagers ride bikes on Saturday afternoons. Most of my shifts were uneventful. I liked them that way. My job was mostly walking the trails at dusk, clearing fallen limbs, checking the signs, logging notes in my little green field book. I enjoyed the routine. I liked the solitude. This was back in late September, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We'd had an early cold front roll-through, which is rare in this part of Texas. You could almost smell it in the air. The dry brush, that faint trace of rain long gone, the breeze moving through brittle leaves. Nights dipped into the 50s, just chilly enough to want a fire. One evening I was walking the back loop trail near dusk, trail number 7, the one that passes close to the old fence line where the land starts to slope. The light was soft and gold, and the crickets had just started their evening tune. That's when I saw it. A tent off trail, maybe 50 yards into the brush. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it was tucked in, positioned behind a cluster of yaupon and cedar. The fabric was a faded green, weathered, with the rainfly barely clinging to the frame. At first I assumed it belonged to a hiker. It wasn't illegal to camp out there exactly, but it wasn't encouraged either. Still, people did it. Sometimes college kids looking for a quiet spot, sometimes older folks who just wanted to be left alone. I approached, announced myself. Park ranger. Hello? No answer. The flap was zipped shut. No signs of life, no fire, no food, no trash. I waited a moment listening to the wind through the tall grass, the distant sound of a dog barking back near the main lot. Eventually, I unzipped the tent. It was empty. Well, not quite. There was a sleeping bag, half unrolled, a small lantern, and a stack of notebooks. 5 of them, spiral-bound covers curled from moisture. The top one had a torn sticker on the front, but no name. The pages inside were strange. It started off normal, weather notes, lists of birds spotted, dates and times. Then slowly it changed. Heard something last night. Not a deer. Woke up to footsteps, very close. No one there. Saw my shadow move on its own. I flipped through page after page and the writing grew erratic. The entries were short, scattered, the handwriting shaky. It knows when I'm lying. It hums before it shows up. It looks like me. By the time I finished reading, the sun had almost disappeared. The air had that pale blue tint, and the wind had shifted. Cooler now, brushing my neck like breath. I stood up and looked around. Still no one. No fresh tracks. No sign anyone had been there in days, maybe weeks. I radioed it into HQ, told them I'd found an abandoned campsite. Protocol said we leave a notice for 48 hours, then pack it out. So I did. Left a weatherproof tag. Made my way back down the trail. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear exactly. Just a strange kind of discomfort like I'd brought something back with me in my thoughts. I kept thinking about the words in the journal. It looks like me. The next morning, I hiked out early to check on the tent again. There had been no dew, no signs of movement. But something was off. The flap was open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, the notebooks were gone. All of them. I radioed again. HQ figured the camper must have come back in the night, retrieved their things. Maybe they didn't want to be found. That happens. I accepted that, sort of. But then I looked at the ground. No fresh prints, not even the faintest boot heel. And I don't know how to explain this. But the tent was zipped from the inside. I kept my eye on that patch of woods for the rest of the season. Walked past it nearly every evening. The tent stayed empty, sagging, until rain finally collapsed it. We hauled it out that November. But here's the part I don't really tell people. 3 weeks later, just before my shift ended for good, I was heading out near dusk. Same trail, same spot, and I thought I saw someone standing among the trees. Just a flicker of movement. A figure looked like a man. Tall, wearing the same ranger jacket as mine. Only I was the only ranger on duty that evening, and when I called out, he stepped behind a tree. Gone. I searched. Nothing. No one. But as I turned back to the trail, I swear, I heard something soft on the wind. A voice, just a whisper, and it sounded like me. I don't work out there anymore. Took a job in a different park farther west. Drier air, fewer trees, fewer shadows. But sometimes late at night I think about that tent. How long it sat out there. How the notebooks vanished without a trace. And most of all, I think about that one line. It looks like me. And I wonder how long he'd been watching before he decided to write that down. I'm not really a believer in the paranormal. Let's start there. I grew up in East Texas, about an hour south of Tyler, where the pine trees grow tall and the air stays heavy with the scent of earth and cedar. Summers were sticky and slow. Nights were warm and full of bugs and cricket songs, and I spent more time outdoors than I probably should have. Even now in my late 30s, I still like camping. Maybe it's nostalgia. Or maybe it's the quiet. Not the quiet you get in a room, mind you. I mean the kind of quiet that hums, where you can hear the rustling of leaves in the distance, the hoot of an owl, the faint wind brushing through branches, like the hem of a robe. That kind of quiet makes me feel still, like the world isn't rushing anymore. Anyway, this happened 2 summers ago. I don't talk about it much. Not because I'm scared necessarily, but because it's hard to explain, in a way that makes sense. But it was real. I was there. And I still don't understand what I found that night. Calm opening, it was late July, a particularly hot stretch of it. I had taken a few days off work and decided to head out to a small, half-forgotten spot near the Angelina National Forest. Not one of the official campgrounds. This place was down a long gravel trail that split off an old logging road. I'd found it as a teenager and never saw anyone else use it. No fire pits, no benches, just a clearing in the pines with enough space for a tent and a view of the stars that made you forget the rest of the world even existed. I got there around sunset. The sky was this bleeding orange fading into soft violet, and the air buzzed with cicadas. I parked my truck near a big pecan tree, pitched my tent in the clearing, and cooked a simple dinner over the small propane stove I brought along: beans, rice, and a little sausage. The forest around me was calm. The temperature dropped slightly. After dusk, just enough to make the sweat on my back feel like a cold cloth. Crickets had taken over the night shift from the cicadas, and I could hear something bigger, maybe a raccoon, crunching around in the brush now and then. But nothing. Alarming. The kind of background noise that tells you everything's working the way it should in the woods. By the time I'd cleaned up and climbed into my sleeping bag, It was close to 2 a.m. Strange signs, I couldn't sleep. Not unusual. I don't always doze off right away when I'm out in the woods. My body relaxes, but my brain likes to wander, especially when it's that quiet. To pass the time, I flicked on my little portable radio. It's one of those old models. Big dial antenna, can run for days on 2 AA batteries. No Bluetooth, no digital display. Just good old FM AM. I started turning the dial slowly, moving through the static. It was mostly just white noise and faint snippets of country stations, the kind of sad songs that always seem to be playing late at night. I was about to shut it off when I hit something strange. At 104.6, not a real frequency as far as I know, there was a clear signal. Not music, not talk radio, just screaming. It wasn't frantic or desperate, not movie screaming. It was more like muffled, distant, echoed, like someone yelling into a steel barrel from far away. It would rise and fall in bursts, never quite rhythmic, but not random either. I sat up in my sleeping bag and just listened. Every 30 seconds or so, the screaming would pause. Then a voice on low distorted and would say something in a slow, dragging tone. I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like it was being played backwards, or underwater. Then the screaming would start again. Escalation now. I'm not easily spooked, but I'm not stupid either. I figured maybe I was picking up some sort of pirate signal, one of those weird ham radio projects or prank broadcasts you hear about online. But this felt off. I decided to walk a little. I kept the radio with me, dial locked to 104.6, and started moving toward the source. The weird thing was the signal didn't fade. In fact, it got stronger. There was a trail, barely visible in the moonlight, more a path where the brush was trampled down than anything official. I walked slowly, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. The screaming kept going, the voice came again. This time I thought I heard a word. Welcome, maybe. The air grew cooler the deeper I went, and a fog had started to settle low to the ground, soft and silvery over the pine needles. I passed through a grove of blackened trees. Looked like they'd been scorched by fire years ago. And that's when I saw it. Quiet climax. There was a trailer, or what was left of one. It sat in a small clearing, covered in vines and soot, half collapsed, on one end. The metal siding was warped and rusted and the roof had caved in. But the strange part, the part that stopped me cold, was the glow. A soft red light was coming from inside, flickering, pulsing, and the radio, now held against my chest like a shield, was blaring. The screams were louder, and the voice, closer. I stepped forward. Something crunched under my boot. I looked down. Charred bones. A scattering of them, small and brittle looking. Maybe animal. I hoped. I reached the doorway of the trailer. The light inside flickered again, and I saw it, a radio, just like mine, sitting on a melted countertop. Wires frayed, casing blackened. But the dial was lit. It was on. No power source. And yet it was playing the same broadcast I'd been following. The scream stopped. The red light pulsed once more. Then, a voice came through. Clearly this time. It said my name. Aftermath I don't remember running back. I must have, because the next thing I knew I was back in my tent, breathing hard, drenched in sweat. The radio was gone. I found it the next morning lying near the trail's edge, cracked and silent. The trailer? I tried to find it again in daylight, walked for hours. Nothing. Just trees. The charred grove was there, but no clearing, no structure. Sometimes, late, at night I scan the radio dial again. Out of habit, I guess. I've never found 104.6 again. But once, just once, I heard static. And underneath it, faint as a whisper, "We are still here." It started off peaceful. That morning I'd packed light, just a two-person tent, my boots, my old canvas backpack, and a soft-sided cooler full of dry goods. I parked at the edge of the Llano wilderness, down past Castell, where the dirt roads split like veins and the old oaks lean heavy with the weight of years. It was the kind of place no one really talks about. Not a park, not a campsite, just raw land that smelled of cedar and river stone. The forecast called for a quiet night. Low 60s, slight wind, and a crescent moon. I was looking forward to the solitude. You know how I get sometimes. Restless, like the quiet can fix me. By sundown, I had my fire going. I cooked a simple meal, beans and sausage over the coals, and watched the stars come out. Crickets sang in the brush. The river murmured behind a curtain of reeds. Occasionally, the wind would shiver through the trees like an old memory. It was perfect, at least for a while. The first odd thing was small, almost forgettable. As I sat by the fire, finishing my meal, I noticed the silence. Not total silence, but the kind that drops like a blanket, sudden and still. And the crickets had stopped. The wind died completely. Even the river seemed quieter. The only sound left was the low pop of the firewood. I remember holding my breath without realizing it. It passed after a minute or so. The crickets resumed. The wind picked up again, tugging gently at the tent flap like an old friend. Still, something about that hush stayed with me, like it was waiting for something. That night I went to bed early. Around 10, I zipped the tent closed, unrolled my sleeping bag, and laid back with my headlamp still on. You ever notice how loud a tent can be? Every breeze sounds like footsteps. Every snap of a twig feels like someone walking up behind you. I tried not to think about it, just the wind, just the brush, just nature doing its thing. But then I heard something else. Not footsteps, not an animal. It was a sound like breathing. Slow, steady, coming from just outside the tent, near my feet. I didn't move, didn't say a word. It kept going for a while. Then it stopped. I waited. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to unzip the tent and shine my light out. There was nothing there, just dry grass and shadow. The next morning, I found tracks. They weren't boot prints, no heel, no tread, just deep, wide impressions, almost like someone had been kneeling or crawling around the perimeter of my camp. They circled twice, always stopping near the tent entrance. I told myself it was a hog, or maybe a coyote, nothing to be scared of. But the thing was, the grass wasn't trampled, just pressed flat, like something heavy had lowered itself gently. That day, I hiked further upriver, hoping to clear my head. The sky was a soft gray and the sun never quite broke through. I walked until the trees thinned out and the rocks turned red beneath my boots. I found a good overlook, sat down with a granola bar and tried not to think too much. But I had this feeling, like I wasn't alone. That night, the wind returned. It came in short, stuttering bursts, not cold, just insistent, like it was trying to say something, the kind of wind that feels intentional. I sat by the fire again, listening. I had my recorder with me. Figured maybe if I talked out loud, I'd feel less alone. "It's just the woods," I said. "Just the old night playing its tricks." Then, somewhere in the distance, I heard my name. Once. Soft, familiar. It came from across the river. I froze. You know how sometimes you think you heard something, but it was just the blood in your ears? This wasn't like that. It was clear. A man's voice. My voice. Calling itself. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my tent, eyes wide, holding the little knife I keep clipped to my belt. There were no sounds, not even the river, just the tent fabric gently shifting as if someone were breathing on it. Not hard, just close. Sometime around 3 a.m. I heard the zipper move, not all the way, just a short tug, like someone testing it. I didn't open my eyes. I just lay there breathing shallow, counting my heartbeats. And eventually the wind returned. Only this time, it came from inside the tent. This morning I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and my boots gone. No animal would take boots. I don't remember leaving the tent, but there were drag marks. My cooler had been emptied and turned upside down. The fire pit was still warm, even though I hadn't lit it again. And there was something else. On a flat stone by the river, I found a second recorder. Identical to mine, it was muddy, half buried. The batteries were dead, but I know I didn't bring two. I don't know who did. Now it's just after sunset. The woods feel different tonight. Thicker, closer. I tried to leave. Packed my gear. Followed the trail back to where I parked. But the road wasn't there. Only more trees. More rocks. The same loop again and again. I must have circled the same live oak 6 times before I realized it wasn't me getting lost. Something is turning the trail around me. I'm going to try one more time tonight. If you find this recorder, Tom, if anyone finds this, please believe me. There's something out here in the Llano wilds. It doesn't want me to leave. It wears your voice. It watches through the trees. It waits until you're calm, and then it comes closer. End of recording. That's where the audio cuts off. The recorder was found by a hunter, partially buried in a riverbank mudslide 2 weeks after the man was reported missing. His car was located, but the trail he described no longer exists on any maps. The second recorder mentioned in the tape was never found, and he never came back.